welcome to The Briefing, a co-production of Now This and The Appeal. Today we are discussing the dangers of facial recognition technology with our guests, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, Congressman Bobby Rush, Michigan resident Robert Williams, who was misidentified and wrongfully arrested as a result of facial recognition technology, and Nima Singh Guliani, Senior Legislative Counsel with the ACLU. Now, over the last few years, facial recognition technology, also known as FR technology, has become increasingly relied upon as a law enforcement tool. But with the lack of regulation, it poses a grave threat to civil liberties, free expression, privacy, and democratic accountability. Historically, government surveillance has disproportionately targeted marginalized communities, and FR technology is no exception. Not only is it used disproportionately against communities of color, it is more unreliable when used to identify individuals of color. In fact, federal studies show that facial recognition systems misidentify Asian and Black people up to 100 times more often than white people. The inequities perpetuated by FR technology, along with recent protests and calls for racial justice and accountability, have compelled companies such as IBM, Amazon, and Microsoft to place moratoriums on police usage of their FR software. Or in the case of IBM, move away from the FR business altogether. But the largest corporate providers of facial recognition software have either kept quiet or doubled down on their products. For example, the CEO of Clearview AI recently explained that he believes FR technology protects society. Meanwhile, there remains no national law restricting how agencies can use FR technology. As a result, police can compare an individual's face against FR technology databases without permission, judicial oversight, probable cause, or even reasonable suspicion. And this is true even if the person is engaging in lawful activities, as long as they are in public or on the internet. So our guests today have recognized the threat posed by FR technology and have taken steps to restrict or prohibit its use by governmental agencies. Just a few weeks ago, Representative Tlaib, Representative Rush, and other Democratic leaders introduced the Facial Recognition and Biometric Technology Moratorium Act of 2020. The proposed legislation would ban FR technology at the federal level and would withhold money from state and local police departments that continue to use it. And in fact, just today, Representative Tlaib and Representative Rush sent a letter to House leadership urging that all fiscal year 2021 appropriation bills include a prohibition on expending any federal funds, including grants to states and localities, to the purchase of or use of facial recognition software or the contracting of any similar services. So with that, let's get started with our discussion. And I'd love to turn first to you, Representative Tlaib. Now, in the letter to the House leadership, you identify a wide range of abuses and concerns that can result from the use of facial recognition technology across all levels of government. Now, can you talk us through some of those abuses and concerns and why you believe facial recognition software should be eliminated rather than simply regulated?
No, thank you so much. And I think it's important for folks to understand where it's being used. I mean, I have been, since getting to Congress, has been fighting on this in the incredible, and God rest his soul, incredible Chairman Cummings brought this to my attention in House Oversight Committee. We had 2 hearings on this issue. And it was very clear that facial recognition technology is racist. It's racist technology that is actively being used in Black and brown communities in neighborhoods like the one I grew up in, the one I live in now. I mean, these are communities that are being criminalized and over surveillance. And understand that, you know, the 2 bills I introduced right away in my first year in Congress was to ban facial recognition technology on public housing. So it's on housing, it's on clinics, it's at parks. So it's being used in places of communities, places that are supposed to be safe. Instead, they're, surveilling it, but also using this technology again that doesn't recognize brown and black faces and that misidentifies folks. So, I was proud. I know my colleague Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, and I had worked early on together to say, no, you can't be putting it on public housing. And then we studied it more and we figured out, oh my, they're putting it at parks, they're putting it in other places. So my other bill literally just says no federal funding to be used toward this technology. And remember this, and I think you mentioned this, Summer, this is for-profit entities pushing this technology in our communities, even though it's not ready or it's probably not well intended. I mean, this is a for-profit scheme that is feeding into this idea that somehow it's going to make us safer, and it actually isn't. And I know Mr. Williams will talk about that. But like the last month alone, I led an introduction of the Facial Recognition and Biometric Technology Moratorium Act alongside Representative Jayapal and Presley and Senators Markey and Merkley. The bill would completely prohibit the use of facial recognition technology by any federal entity, which can only be lifted by the act of Congress. So this is something very aggressive and saying enough. There has been studies after studies, including a federal study, that says it doesn't recognize our faces. And so we have to push back against it. I personally, Congressman Rush and I agree, no family in America, nowhere, should have to go through what Mr. Williams, Robert Williams' family had to endure in this wrongful arrest due to racist technology. But Mr. Williams, he was handcuffed in front of his family for something he did not do, because Detroit Police Department is depending on this fundamentally flawed surveillance. In my view, one person is too many, and we all know that, and Congressman Rush agrees. But we know that it's not just Mr. Williams who has wrongly been targeted. Last week alone in my district, a fellow Detroiter, Michael Oliver, was unjustly and incorrectly charged with a felony because Detroit police misidentified him using the same technology. We see these reports. You talked about it, Summer. I mean, how much can you say? I mean, I have activists like Tawana, part of our Digital Justice Coalition here in Detroit, who have been coming to the police commission, going to the local community and saying, guess what? You got scammed. You took technology that doesn't work in community like ours. City of Detroit is 85% Black. And you're putting this technology in place that's resulting in false identifying. But it's also very much, for me, I know it's a form of oppression, especially when you're pushing this something that actually could get you incarcerated in a falsely way. And it's so painful to see what happened with Mr. Williams, but I can't imagine how many more out there that we haven't been able to catch or be able to identify as the misuse of this technology. And we're calling leadership. I mean, I think Congressman Rush and I and Pramila Jayapal and Presley and many of us have been trying to use our roles in Congress to say enough. We're not going to fund it. We're going to push up against it. And I'm, hopefully my city of Detroit City Council will renew. And I think this next week it's going to be up for City Council to decide whether or not they're going to renew the use of facial recognition technology. I hope Mr. Williams' case and others will show them that it's not the right thing for our city.
Thank you, Representative. And just going off of a bit of what you talked about and just kind of bringing in your support and creation of the Facial Recognition Biometric Technology Moratorium Act of 2020 last month. What opposition have you experienced as a result of putting forth that bill? What opposition do you anticipate? And how will you counter that opposition?
Yeah, I mean, there are folks that fundamentally believe in these flawed surveillance. It's this, they believe in over policing and criminalization. I mean, these are folks that are out there claiming that somehow it's making us safe, but they can never show that crime is actually decreased or that our safety is increased. There's no correlation, and there's no real evidence that even shows what they're trying to predict. So a lot of it is from obviously those that benefit from over policing, those that are involved in this kind of within our police department here are folks that are pushing this as some sort of fix to various issues. These are issues that cameras are not going to fix, and this technology is not going to fix. Our schools are underfunded. poverty's increased among children in our city. There are people living without water right now during a pandemic. There is endless profit right now in mass incarceration. Our judicial system is broken down. I mean, if you look at folks that are so focused on during this uprising on who killed George Floyd, but they're not focused on what killed George Floyd, right? On what are some of the systemic racist policies and structures that are in place. This is one of them. To sit there and eject into an 85% city, Black city, that let's put cameras up, it's supposed to make us safe. That's not what's going to happen. What should happen is investment in neighborhoods and communities where they've seen poverty increase, they've seen blight increase. And so the opposition are those that don't believe that's where the focus should be and the investment should be. I mean, COVID revealed to me, I did not know this, but the city of Detroit spends close to $300 million in the Detroit Police Department, but they spend only $9 million on health and health services. And we wonder why more African Americans died of COVID than any other community, even though in Michigan we make up less than 15% of the population.
Thank you, thank you, Representative Tlaib. And it sounds like, just going off of what you're saying, people are being surveilled without their knowledge as they're living their daily lives, and it's being used against them, and companies are profiting off of it. So turning next to Representative Rush, you have a long record of challenging government surveillance that threatens civil liberties. And with today's letter, you proposed a powerful mechanism for limiting those abuses, and that mechanism is defunding. Can you speak from your own experience about governmental surveillance and about being misidentified by facial recognition technology? And also, this is a bit of a two-part question. Besides defunding, what other strategies can members of Congress use to discourage or even prohibit the use of facial recognition technology? You have to unmute.
Unmuted. I want to thank you again so much for this opportunity to appear on this show, the briefing, and I really am excited about being here with my colleague, Congresswoman Tlaib. And this is a very difficult issue for me. I have experienced over my life I have been the victim of police surveillance, wrongful police surveillance. I have back on December the 4th, two of my fellow members of the Black Panther Party, Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, were murdered at 4 a.m. in the morning. Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, while they slept because of police surveillance. The very next morning, December the 5th, 1969, the police raided my house based on wrongful information by from an informant. And if I had been in that apartment, I certainly would not be with you today. I would have been dead in my grave also. So this issue of facial recognition technology is just the latest form of hyper-aggressive police aggression on in the Black community and on citizens of color. It's erroneous. The information is unreliable, and it's just another example of heightened police effort that really kind of extends the whole driving while Black phenomena. I mean, if you are African American or a person of color in America, then the operative presumption of most of the police agencies in this country is that you have either committed a crime or in the act of committing a crime, or that you are about to commit a crime. And facial recognition is just an output of that long-standing phenomena that exists between law enforcement and police agencies all across this country. So I am a co-sponsor of the bill that HR 7356, the Facial Recognition and Biometric Technology Moratorium Act. And as Congresswoman Tlaib has indicated, I think that what we have to do is that we have to show how serious we are, because this is a threat to the well-being, to the future, to the lives of so many of our citizens, and the way that you can send the message about how erroneous and boneheaded this approach is. You can send that message most clearly by defunding the program, and that's what we want to do. We want to defund any police agency anywhere in this nation who uses federal resources to implement this program, to engage in this type of wrongful behavior. We want to make sure that they use no federal funding for that. And we also want to make sure that the federal law enforcement agencies are not users of this technology. I have, even as a member of Congress, I'm not in any way isolated or I've been the victim of surveillance, wrongful surveillance. I've been the victim of stops by the police departments, and they use every type of small or they use every type of excuse, even the most meager excuses. 2 years ago, I was stopped because they said my vehicle, which clearly identifies me as a member of Congress, they said that my vehicle resembled a vehicle that was stolen early that day in a community that was far away from the community in which I was driving. The only thing that distinguished my vehicle was that I had just left the car wash and my vehicle was gleaming in the hot summer sun. And the police officers used that as an excuse to stop a member of Congress. So, I mean, it's absurdity and the absurdities of this kind of approach, and there's no limit to it. And so we have to do something that really sends a profound, powerful message to law enforcement agencies that we will not tolerate the abuses. We will not tolerate the unreliability of this as being a law enforcement procedure, policy, mechanism, because it has been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt to be erroneous. There was a test by members of Congress and about facial recognition. I was one of them. All right, and 6 members of the CBC, Congressional Black Caucus, including myself, was falsely recognized and thought to be criminals when we are members of Congress. So, I mean, it's just absurd. And our brother here, Brother Williams, is another example. Nobody that is of color is immune or nobody will. Everybody has the potential. Everybody who's a person of color in America have the potential of being falsely accused, maybe even arrested because of the failure of facial recognition technology. And we got to bring it to a halt.
Thank you, Representative Rush. And the fact that such means need to be taken to send the message to say that racial discrimination will not be tolerated? And your example that facial recognition technology even identified you and other members of Congress as being people who were engaging in wrongdoing.
Six members of the Congressional Black Caucus. 6 members of the Congressional Black Caucus were misidentified
Yeah,
through this technology.
that is mind-boggling. And turning next to Robert Williams. And Mr. Williams, Representative Rush and Tlaib have spoken about your story. And you were misidentified by facial recognition technology used by the Detroit Police Department. And the Detroit Police Department now claims that it's only going to use still photos, not security footage, for facial recognition, and only in the cases of violent crimes. So can you tell us about your experience and if you think that the Detroit Police Department's new steps sufficiently address the problems with facial recognition technology?
Well, good afternoon first. To answer that question, they haven't, he said, well, as far as this policy that was supposed to be in place, he said the policy started 2019 and I was arrested in January of 2020. So if there was a policy in place, it was not executed. To say that, I would say that facial recognition technology could have ruined my life. I mean, had it been a bigger crime involved, I might not have been able to come home on a bond the next day. They essentially, I was sought out, arrested, and charged without ever being asked where was I at the time of the crime or if I had any alibi at all. And then after that, we decided to call the ACLU and get them involved. And even after going public, I mean, the information has been out for several weeks now. Detroit Police Department still has not contacted me or my family in any way to say that this was their fault. They're sorry, or they have made public apologies to the media, I guess, to try to slow down the outrage from the people. But I currently still have a jail record, and it's like they could care less what happened to me. But I guess for them, it's just business as usual.
So, Mr. Williams, you're still dealing with the consequences of being wrongfully arrested or something that you never did.
Yeah, I have no jail record. I have no crime record. I guess it would be called the perfect example of somebody who hasn't done any wrong. I'm not in a mug book or anything like that. They use the database of driver's license and state IDs and just picked me out and was like, okay, we got the guy, and came and arrested me in front of my children and my wife and my neighbors. And yeah, it was a done deal, Nate. Yes, very tragic.
Sounds like a horrible experience, an experience that I know that no one else would want to go through. So turning next now to Nima Singh Guliani. Nima, the ACLU has stepped in to help Mr. Williams in Detroit and to draw attention to the serious risks of misidentification with FR tools. Now, where else have you witnessed these kinds of abuses of FR technology?
Yeah, so we've been working for several years now around the country to halt the use of face recognition because we recognize what a dangerous tool it is and that it affects everybody, but it disproportionately affects communities of color, just given existing biases in policing. And I think when you have to think about face recognition technology, it's important to understand how powerful this tool is in the hands of police. It's the ability to identify hundreds of people at a protest from a single photograph. It's the ability to track someone as they go visit their doctor or go see their loved ones. And this is enormous power. And the more and more we learn, the more concerned we become with how it's already being used. And just to give you some examples, following protests in Baltimore, following the death of Freddie Gray, we found out that police were using face recognition on photos posted to social media to identify individuals and arrest them. We know that the FBI has a growing face recognition program. They run thousands upon thousands of searches. Their latest testimony indicates that they can match against over 600 million photos of individuals inside the United States to try to identify them. And despite the massive program they have, it's never been authorized by Congress. They don't have policies in place that even require a warrant or probable cause. And they don't even notify people when face recognition is used against them. So if there are cases like Mr. Williams, people might not even know that face recognition played a role in their case. And so this is a dangerous power, regardless of the accuracy. But I think one of the concerning things with face recognition is that it's been proven to be inaccurate. We can see from Robert's case that those types of inaccuracies have real life consequences. But this is information that's been known for a long time. Study after study has shown that face recognition is not as accurate on women and people with darker skin and leads to greater inaccuracies. And you combine that with existing biases in policing, and it really creates, the perfect storm of a problem that impacts communities in very real ways. After Robert's story came out, the Detroit police released information that showed in nearly every case they were using this technology on African Americans, right? And that aligns with what we know about existing biases in policing. And so I think right now as a country, we're at a moment where we are rightfully re-examining what it means to be safe and the inflated surveillance architecture that has been built that has supported the police. And as we are in this moment, I think it's very important that we halt the use of face recognition. And as Representatives Tlaib and Rasha proposed, stop funding this dangerous technology, which is leading to very real consequences that have affected not just Robert's family, but likely many others who don't even know it.
Thank you, Nima. And for our final question, I just want to open it up to our entire panel. Now, I know many people are watching this episode at home and they didn't have this information and they didn't know about the dangers of facial recognition technology. So what can the average person do to push back against the use of facial recognition technology in their own communities? And Representative Tlaib, can we start with you?
Yeah, they can stop. They can require their city council. In our case, we have an elected Detroit City Council that now it's before them to whether or not to approve it in their budget, is to defund it, completely cut it off. I mean, this is not required by any entity for the use of facial recognition. This is by choice. And there's enough data and information now and different coalition partners that have brought this information for over a year now to Detroit City Council members and saying, this is really bad for our community. Let me show you why. And we've already seen communities like in Ayanna Presley's district in Somerville, Massachusetts, where they've already passed, I think, a resolution of some sort of ban in the usage of facial recognition technology. But I think what Mr. Williams said is very powerful. What we learned in House Oversight Committee is, people think like, oh, he must have did something before, or you're some sort. No, your information, everything on social media, your DMV, the drivers, all of that is dumped into this database. You didn't have to do any. You have no one's asking you for permission. No one's regulating it. Nothing. It's all dumped in this massive data. So, there's this perception that you won't be lumped. No, you are now part of this flawed technology that is falsely identified people. And for those that are not brown and black, it also includes you. It's just at a lower rate because there are actual folks that are white that are being misidentified from this technology. It's extremely dangerous.
Thank you, Representative. Now, Mr. Williams, what message do you have to other people like you who are in the community and don't see this as an issue? What do you have to them? A message do you have to them so that they can start to push back and make sure that what happened to you doesn't happen to them or their family members?
Well, I guess it's fairly simple because I've had it happen to me. So there's no way to really prepare yourself for a flawed technology that they're using to just arrest people. Like it starts with it being flawed at the beginning, they know that, it's been tested that they misidentified people of color or Asian people or Latino people or women almost 100% of the time. Like 96% of the time, it was said that Detroit would get a false identification from using this technology. And to add to that, like if you're a free American or any human for that matter, you shouldn't be the subject of constant surveillance. I mean, I don't believe we just guinea pigs for the facial recognition software. I'm just hopeful that Congress will all join up and take this out of the hands of law enforcement, because they're just not doing their job. They figure they got a shortcut to catching criminals, and then you take somebody away from their home. Like doing my 30 hours of detainment, my daughter lost her first tooth, and I can't replace that.
Wow. So just taking precious moments, time.
Right.
With some people, it could even be years if there's a wrongful conviction away from people's lives, times that they can never get back.
And they've been rape or murder, I'd probably still be locked up, waiting for them to catch the right person, I guess.
Definitely. And Nima, can you close us out by giving your perspective and the ACLU's perspective on what the average person sitting at home watching can do to push back against this?
Sure. I mean, the first thing I would say is that they should call their member of Congress and tell them to support the bill that's been put out by Representatives Tlaib and Rush and others. And also urge them to stop funding this technology, to vote with the power of the purse. In addition to that, as Representative Tlaib mentioned, a lot of these battles are happening at the state level and at the local level. I mean, we've seen cities like Boston and San Francisco, and even statewide legislation in California to curb the use of face recognition. So contact local legislatures and contact your state representatives to urge them to halt the use of this technology. And I think send a clear message that this isn't technology that should be used. It was used without community engagement, without consultation, without approval, and pushed out in secret. And like Robert's story demonstrates, the effect is on our communities. And so I think taking that message and say that's not something we want in our communities is important. If you need more information, you can go to aclu.org/face recognition. We have resources that explain more information about the technology and other ways you can get involved in your community's efforts to dismantle these surveillance systems.
Thank you, Nima. And Representative Rush, in our final seconds, can you please tell us your perspective on what the average citizen at home needs to do now to stop this?
Well, let me just say to my young brothers and sisters who are of color, particularly African Americans, the first thing that I would caution you to do is don't resist the arrest, because even though you might be assured, know that you have been misidentified, don't resist. Live to fight. And if you resist, you don't want to give the police just an excuse, particularly in this heightened era of police abuse. You don't want to give the police the opportunity or the excuse to try to do bodily harm to you. So don't resist the arrest. That's the first thing. The second thing is we have to really, as indicated before, at the local level with city council, at the state level with state legislators, and certainly at the federal level, we've got to raise our voices. We've got to demand that this technology is not deployed in our communities, that has been proven to be a false way of identifying people, that is racially discriminatory, that it targets people of color, particularly African Americans. So there's no way for legitimate law enforcement to even argue that this is a sound police investigating tool. So let's eliminate it, real clear. Let's eliminate it, let's defund it at the state, federal, state, and local level, and let's just make it a relic of the past.
Thank you, Representative Rush. And before I close us out, I would just like to send this quickly back to Representative Tlaib to give us her final words on this.
Yeah, I just want everyone to know they deserve to be safe. You deserve to be safe in your own neighborhoods. You shouldn't be surveillance, especially like this, and this kind of technology that, will result in law enforcement misusing it, using it even though they know it's flawed and misidentifies folks. It's just wrong. People can lose their freedom, their livelihood, their lives. I mean, so we all deserve to be safe, and don't ever compromise for anything less than.
Thank you. We deserve to be safe. We deserve to be able to live our lives fully. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining us today and for allowing for this very informative and enlightening conversation about facial recognition technology. Please join us on the briefing later today at 5:30 Eastern, 2:30 Pacific for an update on COVID-19 in California prisons from California Assembly Member Sydney Comlager. Thank you all for being with us today.